Evelyn Hartley could afford any restaurant in the world, yet tonight she pushes her granddaughter's wheelchair into a weather-worn diner that smells of sea salt and fresh biscuits. Within minutes, retired chef Ben Russo serves Rose one spoonful that changes everything. She smiles for the first time in years. But who exactly is this gentle cook, and why does the look in his eyes feel strangely familiar? Stay with me, because the secret he is hiding will test every promise of love, loss, and second chances. The bell above the diner door chimed with a weary jingle the moment Evelyn Hartley eased it open. A gust of salty Atlantic air slipped in behind her, making the paper napkins on the nearest counter flutter like gulls startled from a pier. She paused just inside, one gloved hand still on the brass handle, the other gripping the smooth push bar of her granddaughter's wheelchair. The place smelled of browned butter, percolating coffee, and something sweet, perhaps peach cobbler reheating under a metal dome. The scent wrapped around Evelyn so quickly she felt the sting of nostalgia bloom behind her ribs. Decades had passed since she sat in a roadside cafe that didn't have linen, candlelight, or a maitre d' to announce her arrival. Tonight none of those frills mattered. Tonight she needed quiet, anonymity, and hope. Rose, 8 years old and bird delicate, blinked up from beneath the wide brim of her knitted hat. Her pale cheeks flushed from the cold, but her eyes, a washed-out blue inherited from Evelyn's late daughter, held the faraway vacancy that had unsettled doctors for years. Cerebral palsy limited Rose's speech and mobility. Grief had muted what little curiosity she used to share with the world. Evelyn guided the wheelchair over the threshold, careful of the metal lip, and closed the door behind them. The bell gave a softer farewell chime. Several heads turned, mostly older couples finishing seafood chowder, but no one lingered. In a town where January winds could slice through the thickest coat, a stranger with a child was simply another storm-tossed traveler. A waitress with silvering curls clipped at her nape hurried forward. "Evan and Mayim, just the two of you?" Her name tag read Miriam in cheery red letters. "Yes, just us," Evelyn answered, smoothing the wool scarf at her neck. "Someplace quiet if you can manage." Miriam's smile softened. "There's a little booth by the window. See views better in daylight, but the waves sound nice no matter the hour." Evelyn glanced at Rose, then nodded. "That will do nicely." They followed Miriam past flickering neon signs advertising chowder bowls and blueberry pie. The floor creaked pleasantly, honest wood planks beneath honest feet. When they reached the last booth, Evelyn maneuvered the wheelchair so Rose faced the window while she herself slipped onto the cracked vinyl bench opposite. Outside, low tide revealed slick black rocks and tangled seaweed. A lighthouse beam swept the horizon in patient arcs. Miriam laid 2 menus on the table, but Evelyn kept her gloves on the laminated covers. She already knew Rose wouldn't choose anything, and Evelyn's own appetite had been whittled thin by months of worry. What mattered was the ritual, pretending a decision could still be made. "Our cook's name is Ben," Miriam offered kindly. "He makes a squash soup that'll chase the cold right out of your bones." Evelyn managed a small, polite smile. "That sounds lovely, thank you." When the waitress left, silence dropped between grandmother and child. The diner's distant clatter, plates meeting sinks, silverware rattling in tubs felt oddly soothing, like the hum of an old radio between stations. Evelyn reached across the table and rested her gloved hand on Rose's tiny fingers. They were curled inward, thumb tucked beneath. "Rosie, darling, we were going to have some soup." She kept her voice airy like wind among chimes. "Orange soup. Just the way you liked it at the Orchard Cafe, remember?" Rose's gaze tracked the lighthouse beam outside, unfocused. No nod, no frown, just the stillness Evelyn both feared and had grown accustomed to. A lump gathered in the widow's throat. She swallowed it down with practiced grace. Tonight isn't about outcomes, she reminded herself. Tonight is about trying. Minutes later, Miriam returned carrying a tray that wobbled slightly as she approached. On it sat a steaming bowl of butternut squash soup crowned with a drizzle of cream. The aroma earthy, sweet, spiced with nutmeg, rose in gentle swirls. Beside the bowl, a grilled cheese sandwich had been cut into rustless strips, perfect for small hands. Behind Miriam, a tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the kitchen, passed throughout, wiping his hands on a linen towel. He wore a black apron and a thin knit cap that wouldn't quite contain waves of dark hair dusted with salt and pepper. His eyes, a soft brown, flecked toward their booth with open curiosity. He murmured something to Miriam, who nodded, then disappeared back into the kitchen. Evelyn suspected that was Ben, but before she could ponder further, Miriam placed the bowl in front of Rose. "Soup's not too hot," she assured. "Chef cooled it special." She set down 2 spoons, one standard, one smaller with a padded grip. Evelyn exhaled, gratitude mixing with fear. The adapted spoon was thoughtful but also a reminder of every failed attempt before. She lifted it, scooped a small orange pool, and angled forward. "Rosie, just a taste, darling." The spoon hovered. Rose didn't lift her head. No muscle in her face betrayed awareness of the offering. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She tried again, voice softer. "Please." Nothing. Across the diner, someone cleared their throat. Evelyn glanced up and found the chef Ben standing a respectful distance away, towel draped over one forearm like a maitre d' from an era of palm chord orchestras. He nodded once, as if asking permission to approach. She gave the faintest tilt of her chin. He stepped forward, voice low. Mind if I try something, ma'am? His accent carried a hint of New England coastline, rounded vowels mellowed by ears. Evelyn blinked, surprised. I wouldn't he mind at all. Pride might have rejected help, but desperation welcomed it. Ben crouched so his eyes were level with Rose's. He didn't speak right away. Instead he set the towel on the table, rolled up his sleeves, and reached for a strip of sandwich. With deliberate care, he tore a corner no larger than a postage stamp and pressed it lightly against Rose's lips. A crumb fell. He didn't flinch. Rose, he said, like he was greeting an old friend at the pier. Do you know what makes this sandwich special? He waited a beat. The bread is baked right here. I put honey in the dough. Honeybees spend their whole lives gathering drops of summer just so we can taste sunshine in January. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted. She'd never heard speech quite like that simple. Yes, but threaded with images bright enough to pierce the night. Ben continued, still holding the bread at Rose's mouth. If you try one bite, you will feel that summer on your tongue. It might remind you of laughing in a garden. His tone carried neither pity nor command. It was an invitation, gentle as a tide pulling shells back toward the sea. Rose's eyelids fluttered, tiny, almost imperceptible, but Evelyn saw the first flicker of response. The child's lips parted a fraction. Ben waited, motionless, another second, and Rose's tongue darted out, just enough to brush the bread. Evelyn gasped softly. Ben's shoulders seemed to relax. That's it, he murmured. Little bit of summer right here. Rose chewed 1, 2, 3 slow motions, then swallowed. She didn't smile, but her gaze moved from the lighthouse beam to Ben's face. For the first time all day, her eyes truly focused. A warmth spread through Evelyn's chest, so sudden it felt like sunlight breaking over a storm cloud. Tears burned the edges of her vision. She dabbed them away with her gloved knuckles before they could fall. Ben stood, careful not to disrupt the fragile miracle. I'll bring a different spoon, he said. One with a deeper bowl might help. He started to walk off but paused, glancing at Evelyn. May I keep talking to her while she eats? Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. Please do. He fetched the spoon, returned, and this time offered a sip of soup. Rose accepted, not eagerly, but without resistance. The cream left a pale mustache above her lip. Ben gently wiped it away with the towel. He spoke of wind chimes, of harbor seals that bark like dogs, of the first strawberries that would arrive in May if the frost and tea linger too long. With each story Rose managed another taste. Soon half the bowl was gone. Miriam watched from the counter, one hand pressed over her heart. A grizzled fisherman at a corner stool sniffed and pretended it was the onions in his clam basket. The diner, bathed in flickering overhead lights, felt transformed, no longer simply a refuge from cold, but a chapel where ordinary kindness became holy. Evelyn reached across the table and touched Ben's sleeve. Thank you, she whispered. The words weighted with more gratitude than any charity gala speech she'd ever given. He shook his head as if he'd merely tightened a loose wheel on a passing stroller. She did the hard work. His gaze softened, but sometimes it helps to hear a different voice. Evelyn nodded, though her mind tumbled with questions. Who was this man who spoke like a poet and handled sadness like a craftsman? How many silent children had he coaxed back toward life before tonight? Ben straightened, returning the spoon to the saucer. If you need anything else, just wave. He stepped away. Rose's eyelids drooped, heavy with the comfortable fatigue that comes after eating warm food on a winter night. Evelyn eased the blanket over her granddaughter's knees. When she looked up, she found Ben again at the kitchen pass, his posture relaxed, but his eyes still on them, as though he had entrusted something fragile to their booth and wasn't willing to turn his back until it was safe. Evelyn took a breath. Resolve crystallized, cold and clear. She would speak to him before they left, learn his last name at the very least. Maybe ask if he ever did private catering. Yes, that sounded less desperate than asking him to become the axis of her life. She checked her watch, nearly 8:30. Rose needed rest. Evelyn waved Miriam over for the check, but the waitress shook her head. Already covered, ma'am, she said softly, nodding toward Ben. Evelyn's mouth parted. She was unaccustomed to debts of gratitude she couldn't repay with an Amex card. Then please add a generous tip to the drawer, she insisted. Miriam smiled. I thought you might say that. Already taken care of as well. She winked and slid a small paper bag onto the table. Chef packed a slice of the peach cobbler for later. The kindness pressed fresh tears to Evelyn's lashes. She bundled Rose against the chill and steered her toward the exit. Ben emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands. Safe drive, he said. Evelyn stopped. Thank you, Mr. Russo, he supplied. Ben Russo. Mr. Russo, she repeated, the name fitting into her memory like a key. I am Evelyn Hartley. She hesitated, suddenly shy. You gave my granddaughter a gift tonight. He glanced at Rose, then back. Sometimes gifts circle back. He nodded once, then disappeared into the kitchen, leaving the aroma of baked peaches and something more elusive possibility. Outside, the night had grown colder, frost glittering on the diner's window ledge like spilled sugar. Evelyn adjusted Rose's blanket and started the long, careful walk to the Bentley parked under a flickering street lamp. As she buckled her seatbelt, Rose made a quiet sound, half sigh, half hum. Evelyn froze, heart hammering. The girl's eyelids fluttered, and for one heartbeat her lips curved, a smile. It was too slight to claim for certain, but hope doesn't measure in miles, it begins in inches. Evelyn turned the key. The engine purred. On the radio, an old Nat King Cole song filled the cabin. Smile though your heart is aching. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. This time welcome. She glanced at the diner's weathered sign glowing against the black sky, and whispered a promise to the steering wheel, to the stars, to her own trembling heart. We'll come back tomorrow. Across the lot, unseen, Ben Russo stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded, watching the taillights disappear over the hill. He released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding and touched the pocket of his apron where a crumpled photo lay. Himself, a little boy, and a sister who had never grown old. The lighthouse beam swept the sea, keeping its lonely watch. And somewhere in the darkness between two weary souls, a thread of something delicate and bright had been tied, waiting to be pulled taut in the nights ahead. The Atlantic dawn arrived in bruised shades of violet and coral, filtering through the turret windows of Hartley Manor. Evelyn had not slept. Instead, she drifted from nursery to sunroom and back again, cradling a tepid mug of chamomile that lost its warmth hours earlier. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw the single bite of haunted bread, the way Rose's throat bobbed as she swallowed, the nearly imperceptible curve of those pale lips. It had been so small a victory most people would have missed it. But when you lived in the shadows of silence, you learned to celebrate even the faintest flicker. Now, with frost still silvering the lawn, Evelyn straightened the collar of her cashmere coat and wheeled Rose toward the garage. Their driver, Malcolm, looked up in surprise. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartley." The schedule said nothing about an outing. "It does now." Evelyn's tone held the polite finality of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We're going back to the seaside diner." Malcolm opened the rear door of the Bentley, careful to keep the wind from slamming it shut. He lowered the wheelchair ramp, recognition glimmering in his tired eyes. He, too, had noticed Rose's faint glow when they returned home last night. "Very good, ma'am." The drive down Shoreline Road traced the water's edge. Ice green waves slapped against rocks, spraying white foam that caught the sunrise. Rose, swallowed beneath a quilt Evelyn's late husband had brought back from Morocco, stared out the window. Her expression remained blank, yet her left hand toyed with the corner tassel of the blanket, a sign of alertness, however small. "Almost there, darling," Evelyn murmured, smoothing a stray curl that peeked beneath Rose's knitted cap. "Just a quick visit. We'll warm up with that lovely soup." Truthfully, Evelyn had no appetite for breakfast of any variety. What propelled her back to the diner was something tighter than hunger, looser than faith, the sense that a door had opened, and if she didn't step through immediately, it might vanish. Malcolm parked beside a battered pickup truck dusted with salt. The diner's neon open sign flickered despite the daylight. Outside, gulls squabbled over a cracked lobster buoy tangled in seaweed. Evelyn inhaled the sharp brine as she guided Rose up the ramp. She half expected the bell to greet them with last night's familiar jingle, but the sound still drew a smile to her lips. The restaurant was quieter in the morning, no fisherman at the counter yet. Only Miriam wiping down tables and humming to herself. "Well, aren't you two a sight for sore eyes?" the waitress beamed, her silver curls catching the overhead light. "Back for seconds already?" "It appears we are," Evelyn said, ushering Rose toward the same booth. "Is Mr. Russo?" "Chef's in the kitchen," Miriam winked. "He is always here before sunup. Says the ocean pancakes behave better if they watch the sunrise." Evelyn smoothed her skirt, warming to the woman's gentle humor. "Could you tell him Rose and I have returned? Perhaps the soup if it is not imposing. You're family now." Miriam's voice dropped to a confidential whisper. "He'll be thrilled." She bustled toward the pass-throbe. Behind the stainless steel shelf, Ben Russo stood ladling batter onto a griddle. Steam wafted around him like a benevolent ghost. He glanced up at Miriam's call, then at the window where Evelyn sat. His face lit a sunrise no less striking than the real one outside. He slid 2 plates to the dishwasher, wiped his hands, and emerged moments later carrying a tray laden with comfort, a smaller bowl of squash soup, a fresh mug of hot cocoa topped with marshmallow clouds, and, for Evelyn, a single blueberry scone drizzled with lemon glaze. "Morning." His voice held a husky warmth that seemed brewed from the same beans as the diner's coffee. "Thought I'd try cocoa today, extra calcium, less intimidation." Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "You read my mind. Rose loves cocoa." An exaggeration. Rose hadn't tasted cocoa in months, but hope allowed small liberties. Ben set the tray down, arranging items with a precision that felt almost ceremonial. He crouched again, eye level with Rose, as though refusing the distance adults so often imposed on children. "Good to see you, Rose. Brought you something sweet. You know marshmallows are just clouds that melted and forgot how to float." Evelyn blinked in surprise. The line was whimsical but not childish. It respected Rose's intelligence in whatever form it existed while inviting imagination. She realized suddenly how many therapists had spoken to Rose in syrupy tones, each failure widening the gulf between them. Ben spooned a bit of cocoa foam onto the rim of the cup and waited. Rose's gaze flickered, her lips parted, capturing the sugary fluff. She swallowed, then faint but unmistakable licked a white speck from the corner of her mouth. Evelyn clasped her hands under the table to still their trembling. Mr. Russo, you have the touch of a miracle worker. He shrugged, cheeks reddening under peppered stubble. Ben, please. And I am no miracle worker. My mother just told good stories. Evelyn studied him under soft lashes. Ben couldn't he have been more than 48? Yet sorrow etched fine cracks near his eyes, marks left by nights kept awake. Burdened shouldered alone. She wondered about the crumpled photograph she had glimpsed in his apron pocket last night. A sister, the waitress said. 1,000 unasked questions perched on her tongue, but she appeased them with a polite nod. They worked in quiet tandem, Ben offering sips, Evelyn adjusting Rose's scarf, trading small anecdotes. Under Ben's calm instruction, Rose consumed nearly a quarter of the cocoa and 3 spoonfuls of soup. Each swallow felt like another stone removed from the wall surrounding her. When Rose's eyelids dipped, the warmth of the diner lulling her toward a morning nap, Ben excused himself to the kitchen. Miriam refilled Evelyn's teacup and slid a small envelope onto the table. Chef asked me to give you this, she said, patting the envelope as though it were fragile. Said no rush opening it. Then she whisked away. Evelyn stared at her name, handwritten in firm block letters, Mrs. Hartley. She hesitated, pulse fluttering like wings, before sliding a nail beneath the seal. Inside lay a single page, plain notebook paper scented faintly of cinnamon. Dear Mrs. Hartley, you don't know me beyond soup and toast, but I know how helpless it feels to watch someone you love struggle. My kitchen can fix everything, but if you'd ever like to bring Rose during cough horrors, I could show you ways to blend familiar flavors into textures she might accept. No charge, just 2 people sharing what we know. Respectfully, Ben Russo. Evelyn pressed the note to her chest. She had spent fortunes on private clinics, speech pathologists, occupational therapies with names longer than Rose's birth certificate. Yet here was a stranger offering grace for free, served in paper envelopes instead of gold-embossed stationery. Before her gratitude could congeal into something awkward, Ben reappeared, wiping his hands. Forgot to mention kitchen window faces south, lots of light, good for spoon practice. Evelyn cleared her throat. We'd be honored, truly. Tomorrow, 7:30, quiet before the breakfast rush. She nodded, surprised by her own eagerness. We'll be here. A spark, maybe relief, glimmered in Ben's eyes before he turned. Excellent, I'll bake extra muffins. Back at Hartley Manor, Evelyn felt buoyant, as though the winter sea wind had filled her like a schooner at sail. Even the staff noticed the housekeeper found her humming over estate papers while she signed them. In the nursery, Evelyn rearranged Rose's shelf of picture books, discarding volumes filled with saccharine moralizing and adding titles with vivid artwork, stories rife with color and courage. As evening settled, Evelyn sat by the bay window with her leather journal. A habit had slipped in recent months. Despair often felt too repetitive to record. Tonight she wrote pages, documenting every sip, every marshmallow cloud, every spark in Rose's eyes. She ended with Ben Russo's name underlined twice. She thought of calling Malcolm to confirm tomorrow's early ride, then decided against it. She would drive herself. Something about steering the wheel, feeling the asphalt roll beneath the tires, made the journey hers, not delegated. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment above a Naudil Supply store, Ben undid the laces of his work boots and sat on the edge of his bed. The single-room flat smelled faintly of love and yeast ingredients that clung to him like affectionate ghosts. He removed the crumpled photograph from his apron pocket, smoothing its wrinkles. A 10-year-old boy, himself laughing beside a little girl with almond eyes and a pink helmet protecting fragile bones. Hey Mari, he whispered to the photo, met another brave kid today. He set the picture on the nightstand next to a ceramic sailor figurine. Maybe I can help this one a little sooner. He showered, letting hot water pummel tight shoulders. Tomorrow he would host Evelyn and Rose in the sanctum of his kitchen. The idea thrilled and terrified him. It had been years since he'd taught anyone how to coax flavor into puree, to turn nourishment into narrative. As steam curled around the light bulb, a memory sneaked in braided pigtails. The smell of hospital antiseptic, a small voice asking for one more story. Benny. The ache that followed was familiar, sharp, but no longer lethal. It had tempered into purpose. Ben shut off the faucet. Tomorrow, he told the tiles. We start tomorrow. Morning arrived again, breezy and bright. Evelyn backed her silver sedan from the circular drive just after 7. Rose nestled in the passenger side seat adapted for her needs. Tiny fleece mittens covered her hands. The cocoa had left them powdered with confidence. Ready for Chef Ben? Evelyn asked as they glided down the driveway. Rose's gaze remained outward, but she lifted one mittened hand and rubbed thumb to fingertip, her subtle sign for yes. Evelyn's heart fluttered. The diner was dark except for a string of Edison bulbs along the ceiling. A reserve sign sat on the front door. Evelyn's key fumbled in the lock until Ben appeared. Drying his hands on a striped dish towel, he unlocked the entrance with a grin. "Welcome to your private culinary classroom." He detraded his knit cap for a white bandana, sleeves rolled to mid-forearm. Revealing a faded blue anchor tattoo, Evelyn wheeled Rose through the empty dining room into the kitchen. Stainless steel counters gleamed under fluorescent lights, mixing bowls nested like metal matryoshka dolls. Ben directed Rose to a low prep table he had covered with a non-slip mat. Beside it sat a wooden high chair retrofitted with seatbelts and cushioned arms. "Thought she could practice here," he explained. "Wheelchair is fine, but sometimes a new vantage point changes muscle memory." Evelyn helped transfer Rose, who adjusted without complaint. Ben placed a tiny chef's hat, a mere suggestion of a hat, onto Rose's head. It slid to one side, drawing the faintest twitch of her lips. "First lesson ingredients talk," Ben announced. He set 3 colorful bowls on the table: roasted butternut cubes, carrots, and baked apples. "Each has a story. We'll blend them, but Rose gets to choose the order." Evelyn watched, fascinated, as Ben lifted Rose's hand toward the bowls. "What should our soup say first? Sweet apple, earthy carrot, golden squash?" Rose's fingers drifted, hovering, then tapped the apple bowl. Ben's eyes widened. "Good choice. Apple opens like sunrise." He pushed the bowl toward the blender. They repeated the question until squash and carrot joined. Ben narrated the process, describing colors: orange like a lighthouse flame, and sounds the whir of the blender compared to a whale's distant song. Rose's eyes tracked each movement. When the soup was ready, Ben poured a small amount into a tasting ramekin, cooled it with a whisk, and produced an adaptive spoon with a built-up handle. "Your turn, Chef Rose." He guided her hand. Evelyn stabilized the bowl. Rose scooped, some dribbling over the rim. But at last the spoon reached her lips. She swallowed. Then she did something entirely unexpected. She reached for another spoonful herself. Tears sprang from Evelyn's eyes, surprising her with their warmth. She pressed a palm to her mouth. Every nerve seemed to wake, vibrating like strings tuned to perfect pitch. "See," Ben's voice was barely a whisper. The ingredients listened. He leaned closer to Rose. "Would you like to bring some home? We can put it in a thermos crowned with marshmallow." Rose's right hand patted the counter, a new motion. Ben understood it as yes. They spent the next half-hour labeling takeaway jars and decorating lids with stickers Miriam kept stashed for visiting grandchildren. At 8:30, the diner's back door banged as supply vendors arrived. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead. "Time to open. Weekends get busy." Evelyn touched his elbow. "You've done more for my granddaughter in 2 mornings than specialists managed in 6 months. Ben shook his head. "I provided ingredients. She mixed courage with them." Evelyn stepped closer. "Boy soft. You humble, Mr. Ben, but humility doesn't erase impact. I know talent when I see it." She inhaled, steeling herself. "I'd like to retain your services part-time, at least. Come to the manor. Cook, coach. I will compensate you well." It sounded transactional, but she had no other language for partnership yet. Then a smile faltered. "Mrs. Hartley, I appreciate the offer, truly. But my life, this diner." He waved a hand toward clanging pots beyond the service window. "It is complicated." Evelyn nodded, disappointment reading through her composure. "Of course, I didn't mean to assume." He seemed to wrestle with an invisible knot. "Tell you what, let us keep meeting here, early mornings. If it still feels right after a week, we'll revisit." Evelyn's relief manifested as a soft laugh. "A week, then." She extended her hand. He shook it, calloused palm warm around her fine leather glove. That afternoon, Evelyn convened a meeting with Dr. Sinclair, Rose's pediatric neurologist. Via video call, she described the diner's sessions: the spoon, the hand signals. The doctor adjusted his glasses, astonished. "Anecdotal improvement can be misleading," he cautioned, "but if the child shows voluntary movement and engagement, we must nurture it. Routine and trust are paramount." Evelyn agreed, though she needed no physician to validate her instincts. Some truths were felt in bone. She spent the evening creating a scheduled diner sessions at 7:30. Followed by a stroll along the pier, then home for rest. Simplicity, predictability. She emailed it to Ben, who responded with a thumbs-up emoticon and a single line: "Got extra marshmallows." It was astonishing how a tiny digital icon could make Evelyn's heart flutter like a schoolgirl's. At bedtime, she wrapped Rose in the quilt and read from a new picture book, a story about a sea otter learning to trust the tide. Rose's gaze stayed on the illustrations longer than usual. When Evelyn kissed her forehead goodnight, Rose's left hand brushed Evelyn's sleeve, intentional, unmistakable. Evelyn stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and let silent sobs shake her shoulders. They were tears of gratitude, ripe with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be brighter still. Across town, the The diner buzzed with Saturday traffic. Ben flipped rapcake sliders while listening to Miriam recount a TV show about long-lost relatives reuniting. "You ever think of finding your folks?" she teased. "Imagine a Russo family reunion." Ben smiled tightly. "My family is wherever the stove is warm." He played at the sliders, but his mind wandered to Hartley Manor, imagining vaulted ceilings, hashed hallways. He wondered what ghosts Evelyn carried besides grief and whether he was ready to step into those marble corridors. The diner's chipped tiles felt safer, familiar. But then he remembered Rose's small, marshmallow-esque smile, and the fearful thrill beneath his ribs whispered that maybe safe was overrated. As the last customers drifted out at closing time, Ben pulled a notebook from the office drawer, recipes half scribbled, menus never served. On a fresh page he wrote, "Rose week lesson plan," and began drafting ideas: pumpkin ginger mousse, spinach puree, citrus-scented polenta, flavors bright enough to paint hope across winter's gray canvas. He paused, pen hovering. At the top he added one more line: story ingredients, her courage. My patience, Evelyn's love. He underlined it twice. Outside, the lighthouse beam cut through fog, steady as a heartbeat. In separate homes, two adults lay awake, one in silk sheets, the other on cotton worn thin, both contemplating the same fragile miracle: a little girl who had tasted summer in January and decided, at last, that maybe she wanted more. Monday's dawn was washed in pewter, the sky over the harbor bruised with low clouds that promised snow before dusk. Yet inside the seaside diner the air glowed golden, as though the burners themselves pumped sunlight instead of gas. Evelyn wheeled Rose in at 7:29 sharp, cheeks ruddy from the salt-sharp wind, and found Ben already waiting in the kitchen doorway with two knitted scarves slung around his neck like twin question marks. "Morning, ladies," he greeted, voice still rough with sleep. "Kitchen is warm and the cinnamon is showing off." He stepped aside so Rose could roll through the swinging doors that read staff only. Miriam winked from a booth she was polishing. She had grown used to these private sessions and took quiet pride in guarding them from early bird tourists with camera flashes and loud sneakers. The routine had become as comforting as church bells. Rose settled at the low prep table. Evelyn hung her wool coat on a hook shaped like a mermaid tail. Ben placed 3 bowls of brightly colored ingredients in front of his youngest Southchef, and the 3 of them set about turning nourishment into hope. Today's palate was daring: roasted beet, gala apple, and vanilla steeped pear. Ben called it sunset puree because he imagined Rose deserved a sky that tasted sweet. But halfway through the blending, Evelyn noticed the faint tremor in Ben's hands. Not the gentle shake that comes from cold, this was the uneven flutter of nerves. He dropped a spatula, muttered an apology, then overwhipped the beet until the color dulled from garnet to brick. The change might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, yet Evelyn's eyes, trained by decades of philanthropic boardrooms, read tension the way sailors read wind. She touched his forearm. "Everything all right?" Ben forced a smile. "Just an off morning." He rinsed the spatula too forcefully. Water splashed his apron. "Let us add a pinch of cardamom." Rose wakes up the pair. Rose, oblivious to adult undercurrents, tapped the spice tin with her knuckle. She tasted the first spoonful and miracle consistent as the tide nodded once. The new gesture she'd invented to say good. When the lesson ended, Ben boxed 2 jars of sunset puree, tied them with twine, and handed them to Evelyn. "Heat low and slow. She'll taste the pear first, beet second. Layers matter." His smile faltered at the edges the way dough falls when the oven door slams. Evelyn studied him beneath the brim of her low hat. "Would you join us for tea this afternoon?" Hartley Manor, 3 o'clock. "We have a library fire that begs company on gray days." Ben opened his mouth, closed it. A ghost crossed his eyes: reluctance, fear, then vanished. Another time, perhaps. He started to retreat to the grill line, but Evelyn's voice followed him. Gentle as snowfall. "Doors stay open, Mr. Russo." He raised a hand without turning back. "Appreciated." Two hours later, after Rose's seaside stroll and morning nap, Evelyn sat in her study scrolling through an online newspaper. A headline caught her eye: commemorative concert honors Mariela Russo 5 years gone. Below, a photograph froze a girl of maybe 13, smiling despite the aluminum halo that braced her skull. She clutched a violin bow angled like a sword of light. The surname prickled Evelyn's skin. She clicked. The article recounted a benefit concert for pediatric neurological research, dedicated to the memory of prodigy Mariela Russo, who had lived with brittle bone disease until complications from pneumonia claimed her at 14. It mentioned a grieving older brother, Benedict, who'd abandoned a rising culinary career in Boston to care for her during her final year. Evelyn leaned back, fingers steepled to her lips. The tremor, the sudden withdrawal. The anchor tattoo symbols rearranged themselves into a story too heavy for a breakfast counter. She closed the laptop as Rose stirred on the sofa nearby, then reached for her phone. Ben stood on the breakwater by noon, coat collar flipped against the wind. Wetip smashed the granite blocks, sending spray that tasted of metal. He had walked there straight from the diner after handing off the grill to the junior cook. His boots slipped on seaweed he didn't care. The morning's puree success should have filled him with the quiet satisfaction he lived for. Instead, each accomplishment with Rose hammered home an echo you promised yourself never again. Never again to grow attached, never again to believe you could outrun the mathematics of loss. Memories had a way of ambushing him in sensory shards, pear juice on Mariela's lips in a hospital bed, her cough rattling like buttons in a tin. He pulled the crumpled photograph from his coat pocket, smoothing it with trembling thumbs. Mariela's grin beamed up, violin ready. He heard her voice in the crash of waves play another story. Then his eyes stung. Behind him, footsteps scraped the rock. He pivoted, half expecting Miriam or a line cook sent to fetch him. Instead, Evelyn approached, wool coat flapping like a sail, silver hair escaping her hat. Malcolm idled the Bentley on the road above, engine rumbling. "Forgive the intrusion," she called over the wind. "Miriam said you walked this way." Ben tucked the photo into his pocket. "Everything okay with Rose?" She is snapping soundly. "It's you I am worried about." Evelyn halted an arm's length away, boots secure on the wet stone with a confidence surprising for her age. "Would you accompany me to the car?" The wind cuts to the bone. Ben's shoulders tensed. "I am fine here." Evelyn's gaze softened, motherly but not patronizing. "I read an article this morning about Mariela." The name hit like a rogue wave. He turned so she'd see only his profile. "Journalists love tragic prodigies." She sounded extraordinary, Evelyn replied. "Not because of talent, because of courage. Rose might have called her a lighthouse if she could." Ben shut his eyes. Dante what? Turn my sister into a parable for hope. She hated that. His voice cracked like ice underfoot. Evelyn took a cautious step closer. "I am sorry. I meant no disrespect. I only want to understand the man who is changing my granddaughter's life." He barked a laugh devoid of humor. "Changing. You've known me 6 days. 6 days," she repeated, and Rose sampled 3 new flavors, lifted her own spoon, and nodded her first yes in months. "That is change." Ben knelt, fingertips scraping barnacle as he steadied himself. "I failed the one person who mattered most. Any good I do now feels counterfeit." Evelyn crouched beside him despite the wet. "Failure wears many masks. I buried a daughter, Mr. Russo. Some mornings I still believe it was my fault. But Rose can thrive if I live in that guilt." Ben looked at her for the first time, really looked, saw the fine network of veins around her eyes, the fatigue soldered to her posture. "How do you stop the blame?" "You Dante." She glanced at the churning water. "You feed it smaller portions each day until it starves." She offered a faint smile. "Sunset puree, perhaps." A reluctant grin tugged Ben's mouth. Wind whipped a strand of Evelyn's hair across her cheek. He brushed it aside without thinking. The gesture startled them both. Gentle and intimate. Evelyn straightened. "Come to tea. I'll have scones in quiet." Ben exhaled. "All right, but only if I can bring the brioche I've been proofing. It refuses to stay home." Agreement settled between them like freshly poured concrete, soft now, but destined to harden strong. Hartley Manor's driveway curved through bare maple trees, branches rattling like bones of some great cathedral. Ben followed Evelyn's sedan in his pickup, anxiety pacing the cab like a caged dog. He'd never driven onto an estate where gardeners trimmed hedges with clear-line precision. The house itself rose from the hill, granite and ivy, windows tall as church windows. Inside, warmth greeted him, parquet floors, walls the color of antique cream. He carried a basket of glossed brioche rolls, still fragrant, and a jar of homemade marmalade that glowed like bottled dawn. Rose sat in the library, wheelchair parked before a roaring fireplace. The flames painted her cheeks rose petal pink. Beside her, a grand piano dozed under a lace throw. Ben hesitated at the threshold, suddenly conscious of his worn boots. The flour dust on his cuffs. Evelyn beckoned. "Rose, guess who is here?" Rose's head turned. Upon seeing Ben, her right hand fluttered a greeting. He answered with a playful salute, then placed the brioche on a silver tray already laden with teacups, lemon wedges, and a blueberry scone she'd promised. An estate housekeeper named Heloise poured Earl Grey while pretending not to stare at the stranger in the room. They ate mostly in silence. Rose nibbled crumb by crumb, fascinated by the marmalade's shimmer. At one point she lifted a roll herself, a moment so profound Evelyn nearly dropped her teacup. After pastries, Evelyn invited Ben to view the music room across the hall. Portraits of composers lined green walls, a harp stood sentinel in the corner. On a pedestal lay a violin case coated in dust. "My daughter Lydia played," Evelyn said, brushing fingertips across the worn leather. "After her accident I couldn't bear to move it." Ben swallowed, throat dry. "Mariela played too," she said. The violin sounded like wind learning to sing. Evelyn smiled softly. "Perhaps they re-performing a duet somewhere." Silence settled, but not empty silence, rather the hush of 2 separate griefs finding resonance. Ben turned toward a set of French doors leading to the terrace. Snow had bacon, flakes lazy and large. I should head back before the roads glaze. Evelyn nodded. Thank you for coming. She walked him to the foyer where a marble statue of Athena guarded the staircase. With one hand on the doorknob, she said, would you consider a permanent role? Not just cooking, mentoring Rose. He stared at the patterned tile. I can't live through another hospital vigil, Mrs. Hartley. Neither can I, she answered, which is why we help her before vigil becomes necessary. Ben closed his eyes. Mariella's laughter echoed down a hallway of memory. It's okay to try again, Benny. Let me think, he whispered. Of course, she opened the door. Snow danced in. He stepped onto the landing, then paused. Your daughter's violin, may I have it restored? Music did wonders for Mariella's focus. Might help Rose with rhythm therapy. Evelyn's breath caught. If you believe it will help, it is yours to steward. He nodded, adjusting his cap against the snow and feeling, for the first time in years, that he was walking towards something instead of away. That night, Ben sat at his small kitchen table, violin case open before him. The instrument varnish was cracked, string slack, bridge fallen. He ran a thumb along the fingerboard, recalling Mariella's calluses, the way she'd grin after nailing a tricky arpeggio. He imagined Rose, maybe months from now, tapping a bow against the strings, feeling vibrations travel through wood to bone. Could he risk tethering his heart again? Grief like salt water, preserved and eroded in equal measure. He dialed a number he hadn't used in ages. After 4 rings, a voice answered, mellow and surprised. Benedict Russo. Haven't heard that name in a while. Hey, Tony, Ben said, voice steadier than he felt. You still run that luthier shop in Providence? Still and always. Who was the patient? A violin that once belonged to someone loved, then exhaled, and maybe to someone who needs it next. Bring her in. We'll give her a second life. Ben closed the case, heart thudding. Second life. The phrase vibrated through him like a plucked string. Across town, Evelyn tucked Rose into bed. Snow painted the window pane couple scent. She hummed a lullaby one Lydia used to sing while stroking Rose's hair. As she turned off the lamp, Rose reached, fingers brushing Evelyn's sleeve. A clear gesture, stay. Evelyn pulled a rocking chair close and settled in, listening to the winter storm breathe against the eaves. Her thoughts drifted to Ben Russo, to broken violins and broken promises daring to mend. Outside, the lighthouse cast its beam across waves now muffled by falling snow. It swept over the breakwater where secrets were confessed, across the cobblestone streets leading to the diner, and finally into the dark beyond, where past and future folded together like wings. For the first time in years, Evelyn believed dawn might arrive not just as light, but as music. Snow surrendered to sun the following morning, leaving the seacoast glittering beneath a pale blue sky. Drifts of powder still hugged curbsides, but the roads had been plowed clean, and salt crusted the Bentley's wheel wells like dried tears. Evelyn eased onto Shoreline Road at 7:10 sharp. Rose bundled in a fleece poncho dotted with tiny embroidered violins, a gift Ben had left on the manor's doorstep at dawn, with a note that read, every orchestra begins with one brave instrument. Rose stroked the stitched notes as they drove, her thumb brushing over each treble clef as though practicing scales only she could hear. The gesture delighted Evelyn more than words ever could. Small motions, bold meanings that had become the grammar of their days. Outside the diner, a banner now hung between 2 cedar posts, private session back at 9. Miriam had sewn it from an old tablecloth, stenciling the letters in crimson paint. She waved from inside while wiping a coffee pit. Ben pushed the door open before Evelyn could reach for the handle. He wore a denim apron streaked with vanilla bean seeds, and a bandage wrapped his thumb, a careless kiss from yesterday's bread knife, he claimed, but the grin he offered looked painless. Welcome to day 1 of Miracle Week, he announced. We were going international. He guided them into the kitchen where a world map, corners curling, had been taped above the low prep table. 3 index cards were pinned to different countries: France carat vicious was, Italy polenta sunrise, and Japan neso pear moon. Each card held a tiny watercolor of the featured ingredient. New flavors, new stories, Ben said, handing Rose a small wooden stamp shaped like a star. Every time you taste a dish, stamp the map. By Sunday, we'll have a constellation. Rose turned the stamp over in her fingers. After a second, she pressed it gently onto the France card, leaving a purple ink star. Her eyes lifted to Ben. He bowed exaggeratedly, earning the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Evelyn's cheeks warmed. You stayed up painting those. Sleep is overrated when inspiration nags, he replied, already sliding carrots roasted until sugars caramelized into a blender. He nodded toward a small speaker on the counter. Mind if Mariella plays for us? Evelyn shook her head. Violin strains drifted out. Bacchus Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, recorded during a middle school recital. The audio was scratchy, but the intonation soared true. Rose blinked, brows knitting as though the notes threaded directly to her pulse. When the puree cooled, Ben offered the first spoon to Rose. She sniffed, tasting with her eyes the way a sommelier swirls wine. Then she sipped. The texture was velvet spiced with a whisper of ginger. Rose swallowed, patted the table twice her sign for more and stamped another star. Monday melted into Tuesday. Tuesday, Italy. A nor'easter threatened on the horizon, but inside the diner warmth reigned. Ben introduced polenta sunrise cornmeal simmered in tomato consomme until it glowed like dawn, blended with roasted red pepper and a drizzle of basil oil. Rosa's eyes widened at the color. She signed yes 3 times. Then surprised everyone by guiding Evelyn's hand to the spoon so they could feed each other alternately. Laughter cracked through the kitchen like applause. Between bites, Ben encouraged Rose to tap rhythms on the table following Mariela's recording of Vivaldi. Tap tap rest, tap tap tap. The exercise strengthened both motor skills and memory. By session's end, Rose managed 6 consecutive taps without prompting. That afternoon, Ben delivered Lydia's violin to Providence. Tony the luthier whistled low at the instrument estate. Seen worse, he said, but she'll need new guts bridge. Strings, maybe a neck reset. Ben ran calloused fingers over the scarred varnish. Do whatever it takes. Tony eyed him. This for you? For a little girl. Ben's voice thickened. She is teaching me to try again. Wednesday, Japan. Snow returned overnight, frosting the diner windows. Evelyn almost cancelled, but Ben texted a photo of the kitchen's radiant floor and wrote we'll melt the world for her. The menu featured miso pure moon white miso for umami depth, Bartlett pears for sweetness, blended until silken. To Evelyn's shock, Rose reached for the ladle herself. With Ben steadying her wrist, she filled the tasting ramekin almost to the brim, progress the occupational therapist had predicted might take months. She sipped, paused, then made a new gesture, thumb and forefinger forming a circle perfect. Afterward, Ben placed 3 marshmallows on the counter and lined them up like stepping stones. Every bite is a step, he explained. Rose giggled, a breathy sound like broom bristles rustling when the 3rd marshmallow jumped into his mouth. Outside, Miriam shoveled snow, humming along to the violin that spilled from the kitchen. She glanced through the window and wiped tears with gloved knuckles, unsure whether they owed more to cold wind or warm joy. Thursday, the manor. An overnight pipe burst in the diner, flooding the dry storage. Miriam's frantic call woke Ben at 4 a.m. He raced over, ankle deep in water by dawn. Evelyn arrived to help, but Ben insisted she keep Rose away from the chaos. Routine matters, Evelyn argued. Ben thought for a moment, then offered an alternative. 2 hours later, his pickup rumbled into Hartley Manor's drive loaded with folding tables, hot spices and speakers. The staff converted the sunroom into a makeshift kitchen. Sunlight refracted through frosted panes, turning steam into prisms. The dais dish honored England Rose's idea after Ben showed her a Union Jack sticker. They crafted foggy morning soup, cauliflower, parmesan, and a pinch of nutmeg, pureed until pale as mist. When Rose lifted the spoon, her grip faltered, spilling onto her poncho. She froze, lower lip wobbling, the first sign of frustration since Miracle Week began. Ben knelt. Mist always falls. The trick is seeing what hides underneath. He dabbed the poncho, then slurped the fallen soup off his own thumb. Tastes even better off fabric. Rose's eyes flickered, and she tried again, this time steady. Success. Evelyn excused herself to hide tears, stepping into the hall where portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls. She pressed her back to cool paneling, eyes skyward in silent thanks. Friday, the concert hall. Hartley Manor's ballroom Tea hosted a gathering since Lydia's memorial. But by Friday afternoon, French doors were propped open, polishing cloths flew across candelabras, and an old photograph had been dusted off. Evelyn had phoned half a dozen friends, stewards of local arts foundations, inviting them to an informal listening session. She didn't specify the guest of honor. At 4 o'clock sharp, Ben arrived with the restored violin, gleaming amber under fresh varnish. Tony had rushed the job, exultant over the cause. The strings hummed even under the lightest stroke. Ben tuned them by ear. Eyes misting. She's ready, he whispered. Evelyn wheeled Rose into the ballroom, sunlight glazing the parquet floor. A semi-earl of acquaintances sipped tea, murmuring curiously. Miriam slipped in through a side door, flower on her cheek and pride in her eyes. Ben approached Rose. Every orchestra needs a conductor, he said, handing her a small baton, really a polished chopstick. He placed the violin beneath his chin. You cue me. Rose stared at the baton, then at him. Her grip tightened. Ben gave a minute nod. Rose lifted her hand down up. The first note rang clear, impossibly pure, echoing against crystal chandeliers. Gasps rippled among the guests. Ben played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, simple and slow. Mid-song, Rose raised the baton higher, signaling crescendo. Ben obliged, letting the melody swell until even the Manor's stoic statues seemed to lean in. When the final note faded, silence held for one miraculous heartbeat, then applause erupted. Rose flinched at the suddenness, but Evelyn knelt, kissing her cheek. You conducted, darling. They applauded you. A guest approached Evelyn. We must sponsor music therapy for the child. Imagine the press. Evelyn bristled, but Ben shook his head gently. Let Rose guide the tempo, he said. Spotlights blind more than they warm. Evelyn exhaled, grateful. That night, alone in his apartment, Ben replayed the concert memory. He set Mariela's old recital recording aside and listened instead to the silence after the final note, a silence not of absence but of awe. He slept with the violin propped on a chair, as if guarding a portal back to faith. Saturday, the setback. Miracle Week had felt charmed, yet progress rarely travels a straight road. During Saturday's session at the diner, pipes were paired overnight. Ben introduced a bold flavor curried pumpkin with coconut milk. The aroma tickled Rose's nose, but when the spoon neared her mouth, she turned away sharply, lips clamped. Evelyn tried coaxing. Rose's eyes watered. She slapped the spoon. Puree splattered Ben's apron. The kitchen hushed. Frustration shook Rose's shoulders, then dissolved into sobs, raw, unfiltered sorrow they hadn't heard before. Ben set the spoon down and slid to the floor beside her chair, crossing his legs. "No curry today," he said softly. "Maybe no soup at all." He glanced at Evelyn, silently inviting her to join. Evelyn sank onto the tile, heedless of her designer slacks. They sat, three souls in a triangle, the hum of the fridge punctuating Rose's sobs. Ben began tapping a rhythm on the floor. Tap, tap, rest. Tap, tap, rest, the pattern Rose had nailed earlier in the week. Eventually her breathing signed with it. Tears slowed. "Stories," Evelyn whispered, catching on. "Tell us a story, Ben." He nodded, eyes never leaving Rose. Long ago, a young sailor set out to map every flavor in the world. One day he tasted curry so spicy it scared him. He thought, "This doesn't belong on my map." But the spice followed him, hiding in other foods: pumpkin, chocolate, even tea. He realized the flavor wasn't tea scary. It was surprising, and surprises. He tapped Rose's knee. "Teach our tongues to dance." Rose cupped, cheeks blotchy, but her eyes studied him. Ben lifted a marshmallow. "No curry, just cloud." He set it on her palm. She squished it, then popped it in her mouth. The crisis eased, but exhaustion replaced it. Evelyn checked the time. Session overrun. They wheeled Rose to the car, both adults subdued. At the manor, Rose napped heavily. Evelyn lingered outside her door, guilt gnawing. Had they pushed too far? Her phone chimed a message from Ben: "Setback failure. Rest. Tomorrow sunrise. Polenta encore." And no curry. A second bubble appeared. "You redoing beautifully." Evelyn's shoulders sagged with relief. She hadn't known she sought. She typed back, "So are you. Tea tomorrow. Just us. 5 p.m. 3 dots. Then ID like that." Sunday, the confession. Morning light spilled like melted butter across the kitchen island where Evelyn whisked eggs for brioche French toast. Ben's recipe attached to the basket. Rose sat nearby, head propped by pillows, still fatigued but calm. They skipped the diner, choosing home for comfort. Ben arrived late afternoon carrying a thermos of mild polenta and a paper bag that smelled of Nutella. They served Rose small bites. She ate half without protest. Stamp number 7. Italy earned its star on the map Miriam had delivered. A full constellation now scattered across Europe and Asia. After Rose's evening maids, Heloise wheeled her to the nursery for cartoons. Evelyn led Ben to the conservatory, heart fluttering against her ribs like a trapped finch. Sun dipped low, painting the glass walls amber. Steam curled from twin mugs of chai. Ben traced a thumb across his mug's rim. "You wanted to talk." Evelyn inhaled. "I once believed money could solve any problem. When Lydia died, I tried to purchase penance, donations, scholarships, memorial wings." But Rose, her voice trembled. "She won T-Hill on a grant proposal. She needs people brave enough to stay when curry splatters everywhere." Ben smiled sadly. "I've got enough aprons." A laugh escaped her. Shaky, she reached out, covering his hand. "Stay." Silence thickened, perfumed by chai spices. Ben's gaze drifted from her eyes to their joined hands. "I am terrified," he admitted. "I failed Mariela. I can fail Rose." "You want tea," Evelyn whispered, "because you want to be alone." Her confession unfurled how loneliness wrapped her after Lydia's death. How Rose's silence felt like punishment. How Ben had remapped their universe with soup and stories. Tears blurred Ben's vision. He squeezed her hand. "I used to believe love was a ledger invest. Withdraw, bankrupt. Maybe it is more like sort of. You keep feeding it. It keeps living even after storms." Evelyn laughed, tears sliding. "Trust a chef to make grief delicious." Ben set his mug down, both hands now enveloping hers. "If I stay, I stay fully cooking therapy, whatever Rose needs." "And what about what you need?" His stare held hers, unflinching. "Maybe I need a family that lets me try again." Her breath tangled. "Then we were in agreement." They leaned forward, foreheads meeting. Not a kiss, something quieter, holier. A vow spoken skin to skin. A light knock broke the moment. Heloise peeked in. "Rose is asking for Over the Rainbow." Evelyn smiled, eyes shining. "Her conductor awaits." Ben fetched the violin. As twilight draped the conservatory, the melody rose. Ben's bow guided by Rose's baton through the doorway. Evelyn watched from a wicker chair, heart full enough to ache. At the diner that night, Miriam locked up and shuffled to the bulletin board where she kept snapshots. She pinned a new photo, Rose stamping the map while Ben and Evelyn laughed. Underneath, she wrote in red pen, "Miracle Week, may it be only the first." January's final lighthouse sweep cast its beam across water and land. Across diner and manor, across grief and hope, in its path stood three souls, stitched together by music and marshmallows, ready for the weeks and miracles yet to come. February unfolded with almost reckless speed, each day lengthening by a minute or two, coaxing snowdrifts to slouch and skylines to blush earlier with dawn. Inside Hartley Manor, however, time felt suspended, sweet as marmalade, predictable as porridge. Rose's morning routine now included a miniature metronome, its ticking signing therapy movements. Ben had moved into the carriage house apartment at Evelyn's insistence, and every Sunday evening they held a private concert, violin and baton stitching music into the corridors. Yet every rose garden hides thorns beneath tender petals, and in mansions built of marble the first cracks often whisper before they roar. 1. It began with a phone call from the Boston Chronicle. A woman named Sloane Merritt, arts editor, reputation for both elegance and tenacity, left a voicemail on Evelyn's private line. I am preparing a feature on unconventional music therapies for children with disabilities. I hear a remarkable story lives in your home. I'd love exclusive access. Call me before I knock on the door. Evelyn deleted the message before it finished. She relished philanthropy but despised attention that turned broken hearts into headlines. She told herself a single ignored call would die like an untended flame. That same afternoon, Ben discovered a glossy envelope wedged beneath the wiper blade of his pickup. Inside, a formal invitation on heavy linen stalked the Hartley Foundation Gala. March 3rd, Museum of Maritime History. The script flowed with expensive confidence. At the bottom, in pencil, your dishes made miracles, let us raise millions. Ben's pulse fluttered. He'd survived charity kitchens before sterile white tents, flutes of champagne, conversations about truffle futures, but never as the headliner. The notion of cooking for 500 patrons in tuxedos while Rose's progress provided backdrop made his throat tighten. Nevertheless, after dinner, he found Evelyn in the library. She sat cross-legged on the rug with Rose, sorting colorful flashcards. Apple boat violin. Ben noticed her bare feet. The grand lady of the manor had abandoned her silk pumps for comfort without apology. That sight alone eased his nerves. He held up the invitation. You sure about this? Evelyn met his gaze. The foundation sends those every year. This time I want the program to support pediatric neural research and public music therapy grants. She tapped a card violin and Rose slid it into its matching outline on a wooden board. We can do good quietly within these walls, Ben, but with funding we can lift other families, too. He knelt beside them. Quietly is safer. For whom, she asked. Ben's answer stuck behind his teeth. For me, he thought. For Rose, for Mariella's memory. But he managed only. Publicity changes stories. It edits out the messy parts. Evelyn exhaled. Perhaps, but some stories deserve to be told before they re-edited by rumor. 2. 3 days later, Miriam burst into the kitchen waving a newspaper. Front page of the Coastal Gazette. Look. Ben wiped flour from his hands and squinted at the photo, a telephoto shot of him and Rose leaving the diner. Evelyn walking behind. All mid-law. The headline shouted, Billionaire's granddaughter finds voice through seaside chef. His stomach dropped. The article regurgitated facts: Lydia's tragic accident, Evelyn's fortune, Rose's condition, then leaned on speculation, secret romance, private lessons costing 6 figures, an upcoming gala rumored to unveil a miracle program. Ben read, jaw clenched, as Mariella's name surfaced like a ghost dragged for clickbait. Chef Benedict Russo, who lost his own sister to a rare disorder, now attempts redemption. Miriam touched his elbow. You okay, hon? He forced a nod, but the wooden spoon in his grip trembled. He threw the newspaper into the trash, then retrieved it, folding it with trembling care. Trash felt too cruel for Mariella's stolen story. That night he skipped dinner at the manor, claiming prep work. Alone in his carriage house kitchen, he pounded dough until his knuckles ached. Headlines were uncontrollable currents. He'd learned that when Mariella passed, reporters hounding hospital corridors to snap the perfect sorrow shot. He had sworn never again. 3. Evelyn sensed his withdrawal like a temperature drop. She found him the next morning setting up Rose's session in strained silence. Instead of stories about traveling spices, he offered instructions clipped short. Grip here. Sip now. Color drained from the rune. Mid-lesson, Rose knocked her spoon to the tile. The clang ricocheted. She flinched, lower lip tremoring. Ben closed his eyes, ashamed. He crouched, retrieving the spoon, but his usual gentle words wouldn't surface. Evelyn stepped in, voice a harp string. Why don't we break for music? She lifted the violin case to the prep table. Rose brightened. Ben exhaled, shoulders drooping. After Rose left for her nap, Evelyn cornered Ben by the pantry. The article upset you. He stared at stacked cans. It premixed ingredients that don't belong together. My grief. Your fortune. Her recovery seasoned with gossip. I've already phoned the editor. They'll print a clarification. Clarification. They all just stir the pot. Evelyn reached for his hand, but he stepped back. I became a small-town chef to disappear from that noise. Her voice softened. Hiding and healing aren't synonymous, Ben. He considered that, chest tight. I need space. He moved past her, leaving a chill in his wake. 4. Space manifested as late night shifts at the diner, douse that required dawn starts, errands to suppliers 2 counties over. He still tutored Rose, but present like a dimmed bulb. Evelyn tried patience, remember how guilt starves when fed small portions, but hunger returned nightly and devoured her calm. On Friday, a courier delivered 30 satin table runners gala decorations, and Evelyn sat in the foyer staring at them like they were funeral drapes. Heloise approached gently. Madam, the florist asks which blooms you prefer. Evelyn's first answer bubbled dark. None. Cancel everything. Instead she inhaled. Peonies, she said, though peonies were out of season. Heloise left, murmuring about greenhouse rush orders. That evening, Ben arrived for Rose's bedtime concert but lingered at the door. She has had a full day, he murmured. Maybe skip tonight. Rose, already clutching her baton, heard the words. Her eyes clouded the storm before tears. Evelyn bristled. Music is the highlight of her day. Ben rubbed the bridge of his nose. I am out of tune. So retune. Frustration sharpened her tone. You taught me setbacks aren't failures. Why hold yourself to a harsher rule? His jaw tightened. Because if I fracture her hope, the break is on my conscience. Evelyn's reply came colder than intention. Your conscience or your ego? Silence thundered. Rose whimpered. Ben stepped back like he'd been slapped. Enjoy the concert, he said and left. 5. Rose regressed the next morning. She refused breakfast puree, tossed flashcards across the carpet, then retreated into herself, a shuttered cottage against rain. Evelyn's heart pounded. Familiar dread rang alarms. Was progress an illusion? Was Rose slipping back beyond reach? She phoned Dr. Sinclair, who suggested a calm day, reinforcing predictable routines. Children sense adult tension, he warned. Ease the tension, you ease her fear. The advice landed like a verdict. Evelyn knew the source of tension. She dialed Ben, voicemail answering with his gravel-warm timbre. Words failed, so she hung up. By dusk, snow returned, fat flakes swirling like shaken paper. Evelyn paced the solarium while Rose dozed under a quilt. Marble floors echoed her restless steps. She realized cracks weren't just figurative. Along the baseboard, a hairline fracture spidered through the white Carrara. Likely from winter-esque contraction, she traced it with stockinged toe, a silent dare to mend stone with willpower. She withdrew the gala invitation from her pocket, reading the embossed mission statement, we lift where we stand. The phrase mocked her irony, standing on fractured marble, lifting none. 6. That night, Ben sat on the breakwater again, wind knifing through his coat. He clutched Mariela's photograph, now laminated for weather. Waves slapped rocks with reprimand. He spoke aloud though no one could hear. I am screwing it up, Mari. Memory answered in her voice, then unscrew it, dummy. He chuckled, tears freezing on lashes. Fear had disguised itself as humility. He realized, refusing the spotlight wasn't protecting Rose, it was protecting his heart from potential failure replayed on front pages. He exhaled a single word that billowed like smoke. Enough. Standing. He dialed Evelyn. She answered on first ring, voice raw. Ben? I am sorry, he said, not rehearsed, just true. I let noise drown music. A shaky laugh. Marble cracks echo in these halls. I am coming home, he said, surprised how easily the word fit. 7. He arrived before midnight. Snow cloaked the manor, muting his footsteps. Evelyn met him in the foyer, clad in her robe, silver hair unbound. Neither spoke. She led him to the nursery. Rose slept but twitched, caught in dream tangle. Ben knelt, placed the violin near her pillow like a guardian angel. In the hallway, Evelyn leaned against wainscoting. She regressed today. Ben's chest hollowed. Then we start where she is, not where we wish. Evelyn's eyes glistened. Sloane Merritt will attend the gala. I can T-bar the press entirely. Then we frame the story ourselves, Ben replied. Truth tastes better unseasoned. She laughed softly. You and your culinary metaphors. He took her hands. Let the world see cracks. Light gets in that way. She squeezed back. Stay tonight? I never left, he whispered. 8. Sunday morning dawned pewter but peaceful. Ben cooked breakfast in the manor kitchen, soft scrambled eggs blended with butternut and a whisper of maple. Rose, still groggy, sat at the counter. He slid a spoon into her hand. No coaxing, no story, just presence. She hesitated, then tasted, swallowed. A tiny sigh escaped her content. Evelyn covered her mouth, relief quivering. After breakfast, Ben wheeled Rose into the ballroom. Sunlight fractured through stained glass transoms. He lifted the violin, but before he played, he spoke. Every instrument carries cracks. Wood expands and shrinks. What matters is the resonance. He drew the bow. Notes poured imperfect, alive. Rose lifted her baton, conducting a tempo only hearts could hear. Downstairs, contractors arrived to inspect the marble crack. Evelyn escorted them but paused at the top of the stairs. Listening to music float, she smiled. Leave it, she told the puzzled foreman. Some cracks remind us we were human. 9. 3 days later, invitations went out anew. The Hartley Foundation Gala presents a story in Suite Major featuring Chef Ben Russo and Rose Hartley. Footer proceeds to benefit community music therapy. Above the text, an unfiltered photograph. Rose mid-smile. Baton raised, Ben and Evelyn beside her, all three illuminated by winter sun streaming through conservatory glass. No headlines, no pity, just truth. Sloan Merritt phoned to fact-check. Ben answered personally. He spoke of Mariella, of Curry setbacks, of cracks in marble and people. The article that followed bore a quieter headline: When Hope Learns to Play. It contained no gossip, only story. Evelyn framed a copy for the diner as while Miriam cried while hanging it, wiping tears with a dish towel patterned in lighthouses. 10. On the eve of the gala, Evelyn stood in the ballroom, now dressed for spectacle. Peonies flown in from Chile, violin-shaped ice sculptures, tables arranged like musical staves. Yet amid grandeur, small tokens prevailed: mismatched mugs at Rose's place setting, marshmallows in crystal bowls, a world map stamped with purple stars pinned near the stage. She traced the Italy star, smiling. Cracks remained in marble, but gold could be poured into them. Kintsugi for architecture and hearts alike. She turned as Ben entered wearing a tailored jacket borrowed from an old friend, the anchor tattoo peeking above his cuff. Ready? She asked. He offered his arm, ready to let the world see us unedited. Rose wheeled in, baton balanced across her lap, eyes bright under crystal chandeliers. The three formed it to blow the Chronicle as cameras would capture tomorrow. But tonight was theirs alone. Evelyn raised her chin, hearing Lydia's voice, sensing Mariella's laugh and the violin strings warming nearby. Love, she realized, wasn't afraid of cracks that played through them, filling them with song until even marble learned to vibrate. Snow tapped stained glass as if applauding quietly. The lighthouse swept its beam, blessing the manor, the diner, the broken stones and healing hearts in between. The stage was set, the world would soon listen, but here, in the hush before applause, three souls stood allied, no longer threatened by fracture, only strengthened by the golden seams they vowed to pour. 1. The gala day dawned like a promise wrapped in silk-clear skies, ocean air newly scrubbed by overnight rain, and the museum's glass facade flashing early sunlight across the harbor. Inside Hartley Manor, staff moved with choreographed urgency, unloading garment bags, checking floral humidity, polishing silver until faces stared back twice as bright. Ben was already in the carriage house kitchen at 5:30, searing strips of duck breast for a tasting spoon he called Hope El Orange. He whistled a Dylan tune while the fat crackled, trying to ignore the fist of nerves cinched beneath his ribs. Tonight 500 strangers would judge every grain of salt, every stumble of his tongue if he dared speak. Yet Rose's baton waited on the stage, and Evelyn's quiet faith felt like a hand steadying his spine. By 7 a.m., Evelyn glided in, still in robe and slippers, hair pinned only halfway. She carried a linen-wrapped parcel the size of a Bible. Morning, chef, she teased, though titles had grown playful between them. Ben wiped his hands. Morning, boss. She unwrapped the parcel, a chef's jacket, snowy white, his name elegantly chain-stitched above the pocket. B. Russo plus the Hartley Foundation crest. Consider it armor, she said, smoothing a crease. Tonight the world sees the man we already know. His throat thickened. Thank you. He fingered the embroidery, half embarrassed, half proud. Wear it for rehearsals at noon, she added. Sloan Merritt's crew is filming Brawl. Ben's smile faltered. The Chronicle is here that early? She promised a balanced piece. Evelyn laid a hand on his arm. We own the narrative, remember? He forced a nod, but the old unease flashbulbs headlines scratched the back of his skull like sandpaper. 2. Rehearsal began in the museum's rotunda beneath a suspended whaling ship skeleton. Technicians wired lavalier mix, florists positioned peonies, and caterers rolled in carts of chemispoches. Rose sat center stage, baton on her lap, eyes wide as cathedral doors. Ben knelt beside her. We cue during the final toast, he reminded gently. Upbeat tempo, think of gulls chasing wind. Rose twirled the baton. Confidence. Sloan Merritt approached with a cameraman. She wore crimson heels, her smile sharpened by ambition. Chef Russo, quick sound check? Ben swallowed. Sure. The mic clipped to his collar felt like a collar itself. Sloan asked him to describe his culinary philosophy in 15 seconds. He managed food as story. I translate feelings to flavor so even a frightened palate finds courage. Lovely, she purred, but her gaze slid past him to Rose. Let us get a hero shot, you guiding her hand. Evelyn stepped in. No exploitation, Sloan. One candid, that is our agreement. Sloan raised manicured brows. Of course, Mrs. Hartley. Good cause, good press. Ben wetted his lips. Something in Sloan's tone, good press, felt like a honest eulogy. He rallied, shifting toward the violin case, but movement near stage left distracted him. Museum trustees clustered around Hartley Foundation chair Greg Tolland. Greg's voice carried P risk if anything goes sideways. The chef's unlicensed. The kid's condition unpredictable. We can have a meltdown on live stream. Trustee no. 2 muttered. Board recommends minimizing unscripted elements. Minimizing. Ben's cheeks heated. He turned away, pretending to examine a plate of brioche and apes. But the words lodged. P risk, unlicensed. 3. The Hartley Foundation meeting convened at 3 p.m. sharp in the museum's war room walnut table. Leather chairs, charts projected on a 50-inch screen. Ben, hurrying to deliver final tasting notes, paused outside the half-closed doors when he heard his own name. Greg Tolland again. Outstanding progress with the child. Yes, but we can hinge donations on a sentimental chef. Liability forms aren't airtight. Another voice Evelyn S. shot back, low but steel-tipped. Ben is integral. Without him, Rose wouldn't be here tonight. Greg sighed. We respect that, but donors prefer credentials. We have Dr. Alvarez ready to demonstrate neurotherapy using volunteers. Less messy. Silence. Then Evelyn. Dr. Alvarez met Rose once. She trusts Ben. We can tape a segment of the girl conducting in advance. Greg pressed. Air the clip. No live risk. Ben's pulse hammered. Tape the girl cut me out. Guilt and anger tangled inside him. He backed away down the corridor, their debate fading behind doors. He found himself outside in the loading dock, the February sun blazing too bright. Heart thrummed like a kicked hive. For months he'd shoved fear aside to be present for Rose. Now boardroom suits dismissed her as bait on a donor hook. He yanked off the embroidered jacket armor, now paper, and folded it with trembling hands. 4. Evelyn located him in the basement pastry kitchen an hour later. He was frosting petit fours with mechanical precision. Shards of white jacket peeked from a trash bin. She touched his elbow. Rehearsal brawless finished. Where were you? He kept piping rosettes, protecting donors from unlicensed sentiment. Her brunette. You heard Greg. I heard liability. His voice was flat cold. They want a sanitized fairy tale. Tape the miracle, trim the cracks. Evelyn's shoulders sagged. Boards act from fear. We'll calm them. You shouldn't have to negotiate my right to stand beside Rose. He slammed the piping bag onto the table. She deserves authenticity, not choreography. Evelyn leaned in. Ben, listen. No, Evelyn. He stepped back, apron streaked with sugar. Every time cameras creep in, someone rewrites the truth. First Mariella, now Rose. I want to let her become a headline ping-pong. Tears rimmed her eyes. Then we push back together. He shook his head. I can fight boardrooms and ghosts at once. He unknotted his apron, folded it. I am out. Dante, her whisper broke. Not tonight. But he was already moving, past cooling racks, up the stairs, through a side door where loading crew smoked under floodlights. Neither looked back. 5. He drove aimlessly north along the coastal highway, violin on the seat like silent conscience. Dust bled purple over the water. He stopped at an overlook, killed the engine, and listened to waves batter rocks. When his phone buzzed Evelyn, he ignored it. Again Miriam, again unknown. He switched it off. Snow began, soft but sure. Baffled gulls wheeled overhead, bleeding accusations. He thought of Mariella's last words, play another story, and winced. Tonight he silenced one instead. 6. Back at the museum, panic whispered first, then shouted. Caterers reported the chef's disappearance. Stage crew found Rose's baton still in its velvet sheath. Evelyn's face drained of color. Greg attempted damage control. Dr. Alvarez can step in. The donors will never know. They will, Evelyn stated, voice like cracked ice. She excused herself, climbed 2 flights, and entered a staff restroom to cry in the stall. Makeup smeared determination washed the rest away. She emerged, phoned Malcolm. Ready the car. In the green room, Rose waited in a satin dress the color of dawn. She sensed chaos, eyes darting, fingers twisting beads on her sash. Evelyn knelt. Sweetheart, Chef Ben is delayed. We going home. Rose's breath hitched. She snapped the baton case shut and pushed it toward Evelyn in answer. No Ben, no music. 7. Miriam, still closing lunch shift at the diner, nearly dropped a tray when Evelyn rushed in. Gown swishing like a storm tide. Rose trundled behind, wheelchair wheels squeaking. Miriam gasped. Sweet mercy, what happened? Evelyn's voice wavered. Is he here? No, child. Miriam guided them to their booth. Last I saw him, he looked haunted. Went north. Evelyn slumped, clutching Rose's hand. The diner's familiar clatter soothed. The glow of neon felt honest compared to chandeliers. Should I call the police? Miriam asked quietly. Not yet. Evelyn brushed hair from Rose's temple. He is fighting demons only he can name. She looked at the waitress, tears finally spilling. But my granddaughter pays the toll. Miriam pressed a menu into Evelyn's shaking hands. Eat first. Chase second. Grief hunts on empty stomachs. 8. Ben parked outside a shuttered amusement pier in Batchport, 2 towns away. Snow blanketed the Ferris wheel carnival lights, long dead, sagged under white weight. He sat in the truck cab, violin in lap, engine ticking warm. Memory flooded Mariella riding a carousel at that very pier. Her laughter had mixed with calliope music and sea salt. He opened the case, bow trembling in his grip. Under yellow dome light he played Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Notes warping in cold air. Halfway through, sobs throttled his throat. Bow dropped. Silence filled the cab thicker than grief. Phone battery, though off, blinked with queued messages. He switched it on. 14 missed calls. 12 texts. The newest a photo from Evelyn Rose in diner booth. Unsmiling, baton upright like a white flag. Caption, your seat is still warm. The words speared him. He stared at the photo until tears blurred edges. Snow intensified, drumming the windshield. He dialed Evelyn, went to voicemail. He tried again. I am sorry. He began, voice ragged. Fear one tonight. I am coming back as me. Cracks and all. He ended the call, turned the key. Truck engine sputtered, then caught. Hang on, Mari, he whispered to the violin. We've got another story to play. 9. Meanwhile, Evelyn finished Miriam's tomato bisque, heart steadied by the familiar heat. Diner patrons watched the grand lady of Hartley spoon soup to her granddaughter with no trace of silk-gloved vanity. Only love. Rose took 3 reluctant sips, each slower than miracles past. Evelyn's phone-buzzed voicemail from Ben. She listened, shoulders trembling. Relief and uncertainty braided tight. She lifted Rose's hand, kissed her knuckles. "He is coming." Rose blinked, and for the first time that night, exhaled without a sob. She stamped an imaginary star on the table. Habit of hope. 10. Greg Toland summoned crisis peer experts at the museum. Donors milled with champagne. Puzzled by the program delay, Dr. Alvarez improvised an onstage lecture about therapeutic sound waves. But buzz spread. Where's the miracle girl? Where's the chef? Sloane Merritt filmed everything, her expression a mix of glee and concern. Either way, a headline. She cornered Greg. Why the switch? Where's the child? Greg wiped sweat. Logistical hiccup. Sloane smirked. Hiccups ruin Gala's stories write themselves. He cursed under breath. 11. It was near 11 when Ben's pickup skidded into the diner lot. Fresh snow squealing under tires. He burst through the door, cheeks frost-scarred, violin case banging his knee. Inside, only Miriam remained wiping counters while Evelyn and Rose dozed in the booth. The bell's jingle woke them. Evelyn's eyes widened. Rose jerked upright, baton clattering. Ben dropped to one knee. "I walked away," he rasped, "because fear said it could protect you." Fear lied. Evelyn stood, tears reborn. "We need you, not for press, for us." He met Rose's gaze. "May I come back?" Rose lifted the baton, tapped his forehead once, permission granted. Ben laughed. A sound brittle then blooming. He looked at Evelyn. "I am late for our concert." She upped his face. "The stage is portable." She gestured to the diner floor. Miriam dimmed overhead lights, neon painted the walls rose pink. Ben tuned the violin quickly. Rose raised her baton. The first note soared raw, unpolished, perfect. Snow pressed against windows like silent patrons. In the hush that followed the final chord, Ben's heart settled. Walking away had taught him the perimeter of love. Walking back showed its center. 12. Later, over black coffee, they formed a plan. The gala would proceed tomorrow as a brunch. Smaller crowd, truer story. Greg could stew. Donors who cared would return. Authenticity over opulence, Evelyn declared. Ben squeezed her hand. "We'll serve hope ale orange with a side of cracks." Rose giggled, a sleepy hiccup of joy. Outside, lighthouse beams pierced snowfall, sweeping over diner and mansion alike. The night no longer scolded, it listened. Walking away had seemed like surrender, but it became doorway. Through it, 3 broken hearts stepped back into the same room, choosing once more to stay when staying fell hardest. And somewhere, in the echo of violin strings, Mariela's laughter blended with Lydia's voice, stitching past and present into melody strong enough to hold tomorrow's dawn. 1. Morning crept into Hartley Manor like a shy guest who feared she'd miss the party. Pale February light slipped through lead glass windows, tracing latticed shadows over Persian carpets and marble thresholds. But the mansion, usually awake by 6 with linking tops and humming staff, lay still, as though pressing a pillow over its own heartbeat. Evelyn Hartley stood alone in the grand foyer, her slippered feet silent on the mosaic compass inlaid at the center. Yesterday's chaos, gowns abandoned, floral boxes half undone, phone calls volleyed like artillery had drained the place of its customary polish. Silk drapes sagged where decorators had climbed ladders and left in haste. Gala name cards littered the mahogany console like fallen leaves. She inhaled. Even without people, the house smelled of anticipation, beeswax polish, hothouse peonies, a ghost trace of Ben's orange glaze, yet each breath rang hollow. How could a mansion brim with so much air and still feel starved of oxygen? Rose was asleep upstairs with Heloise sitting vigil in the rocking chair, and Ben? He had driven back to the carriage house at dawn, promising to shower, shave and return ready to restage the gala as a brunch. The plan steadied Evelyn last night. This morning it felt like a tightrope spun from spider silk. She lifted a gala program from the console. The cover, embossed gold, left spiraling around the Hartley Foundation. Gala taunted her. Beneath, her own note to the printer, a suite of second chances. At the time it sounded poetic, now it read like bravado. Hesitating only a breath, she opened the gigantic oak doors and stepped onto the front portico. The February sun perched low, but bright snowmelt dripped from balustrades. Far across the lawn, the lighthouse beam shut off for daylight rest. Somewhere down the hill, waves whispered that yesterday's failures already belonged to a different tide. 2. Inside the carriage house, Ben Russo stared at his reflection in a foggy bathroom mirror. Razor poised mid-stroke, a newscaster on the counter radio recapped the previous night. Hartley Foundation abruptly postponed its annual gala amid unconfirmed reports of a medical concern involving the family's granddaughter. He clicked the knob off, full modeling his jaw. Regret throbbed behind his eyes like low tide against barnacles. He walked away again. But the diner reunion, Rose's sleepy smile, Evelyn's forgiveness, those were buoys keeping him afloat. Today he would atone with action, not apology. He toweled his face, tugged on the embroidered jacket he'd rescued from the trash, and packed a canvas tote with essentials: vanilla beans, an immersion blender, A 3-ring binder labeled Rose's recipes, miracles measured in grams. Before leaving, he opened the small cedar box on his bedside table. Inside, Mariela's last bow rosin, cracked but fragrant. He rubbed it gently along the violin bow's hair. "Keep me honest, kiddo," he murmured. He pictured her cheeky grin and felt steadier. 3. Back at the manor, Evelyn convened an emergency meeting in the breakfast room, a sun-splashed octagon overlooking frosted rosebeds. Present Greg Tolland, foundation chair, suit more rumpled than usual. Dr. Sinclair via tablet, and Miriam, invited for moral ballast and warm cinnamon rolls. Greg adjusted his tie. "We have 60% donor retention for a brunch. But several VIPs flew back to New York. Pure damage is minimal if we present a concise event at noon." Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "Concise? People donated to hear a story, not a press release." Dr. Sinclair's voice crackled through speakers. "Rose's vitals remain stable. Emotional stress is our greater concern. Predictability will comfort her." Miriam poured coffee like a priestess pouring holy oil. "Predictability means Chef Russo in that kitchen, not some labo puppet," she muttered. Greg bristled. "We can guarantee he'll cooperate. Then we make it worth his while." Miriam shot back, sweetness gone. Evelyn lifted upon the gavel of quiet. "Ben will be here. I trust him." As if summoned by faith, he appeared at the doorway, toad slung over his shoulder. Jacket spotless, morning. His voice carried no theatrics, only resolve. Greg rose. "Chef, we reliberating. We can feature you in a tape segment." Ben crossed the room, set vanilla beans on the table like treaty signatures. "No tapes. Live or not at all." Tension crackled. Evelyn spoke first. "Live brunch, smaller crowd, authentic." Greg opened his mouth, but the force behind Ben and Evelyn's united front blew his arguments out like candles. He sat. "Fine, noon." 4. With 3 hours to transform mayhem into grace, everyone scattered. Caterers returned. Musicians were scheduled. Museum custodians polished the rotunda floor that still bore faint impressions of last night's abandoned dance steps. Ben commandeered the manor kitchen, sleeves rolled, playlist of sea shanty violin pieces looping softly. Miriam tied an apron. Volunteers from the diner arrived, and soon mixers whirred. Ovens glowed. Hope simmered. Evelyn oversaw decorations, swapping last night's opulent enterpieces for simpler arrangements, mason jars of snowdrops and baby sprees. The world didn't need grandeur, it needed proof that hearts could fracture and still beat. Upstairs, Rose awoke groggy. Heloise brushed her hair into a loose braid, sliding the tiny embroidered violin pin into place. Rose touched the baton on her bedside table, then hesitated, as if difference between night fiasco and day revival hovered in that wooden stick. She laid it across her lap. Ben arrived moments later, smelling of brioche and citrus. "Morning, maestro." He offered a spoon of Clevender Honzi yogurt, her pre-concert fuel. She tasted, and searched his eyes. "Unsure? Forgiveness?" He smiled gently. "We all still here." She exhaled, shoulders easing. 5. Noon approached. Guests trickled up the driveway, fewer than expected, but quality, shining teachers from Rose's therapy school. Diner regulars and Sunday best, a retired carpenter who defixed Hartley Manor as banisters for decades. Evelyn refused a red carpet photographer instead. Miriam snapped Polaroids for a clothesline display labeled "Today Matters." Greg intercepted Ben in the corridor. "Just be aware live streaming is down. We'll record for archives only." Ben shrugged. "Fine by me. Less glare on the sauce." Subtext: less glare on Rose. 6. The rotunda smelled of bay-on-fat waffles and citrus reduction. Round tables circled the makeshift stage, a music stand. A single stool, Rose's wheelchair positioned to conduct. On each linen napkin sat a marshmallow wrapped in parchment printed with Mariela's quote, "Surprises teach our tongues to dance." At 12:05, Evelyn stepped up to the podium. She wore a navy sheath embroidered with subtle gold waves, grief as tide rendered elegant. Her voice carried calm. She spoke of Lydia's legacy, of Rose's journey, of Ben's cooking. No teleprompter. The room held its breath. "Today is not about perfection," she concluded. "It is about presence." She turned. "Chef Russo, the floor, or rather the palette, is yours." Ben rolled out a stainless cart plated with 4 tasting courses. "We begin with sunrise polenta corn, tomato, basil, because dawn invites second chances." Servers delivered tiny bowls, spoons flinked. Murmurs of pleasure rippled. Next came foggy cauliflower, then Hopal orange duck morsels glazed crimson. Last, he unveiled miracle mousse, beet, apple, vanilla, topped with marshmallow cloud. "Kid tested," he quipped. Laughter eased tension. Through it all, Rose watched, baton resting on her knees, fingers tapping subtle rhythms. When the final plate cleared, Ben took the violin from its stand and knelt beside her. "Your cue, maestro." She raised the baton. The room hushed. Cameras, only 2, respectfully distant, rolled. Ben began over the rainbow, notes weaving through sunlight that spilled from skylights. Halfway, he modulated into a new melody, one he wrote last night while driving back through snow. Gentle, hopeful, undefined by previous sorrow. Rose's wrist flagged, conducting pace. Her eyes shone. At the climax, a marshmallow confetti cannon, Miriam's rogue idea, poofed small sugar clouds into the air. Guests laughed, reaching like children. Rose giggled outright, baton slicing arcs. Ben ended on a high harmonic, bow trembling. Silence, then applause that felt like surf crashing, a breakwater cleansing, loud, joyful. Evelyn joined them on stage, tears bright. Thank you all, she signaled staff who circulated pledge cards. No high-pressure pitch, just envelopes titled Music Heals. 7. 2 hours later, the brunch concluded. Guests lingered, reluctant to leave, thick as syrup. Donation box brimmed. Greg sheepish congratulated Ben. Unlicensed sentiment won hearts. Ben just smiled. Flavor as credential enough. Sloan Merritt approached. Camera off. Chef, Mrs. Hartley, when the piece runs, you'll find we focused on authenticity. Evelyn nodded. Stories deserve truth. Sloan hesitated. My nephew has... Your bravery, it matters. She shook their hands and walked away. Heels softer than usual. The museum emptied until only staff remained stacking chairs. Evelyn exhaled. The event, once monstrous with expectation, had resolved small and sincere. She turned, but Rose was gone. 8. Panic ignited. Ben sprinted past coat racks, calling Rose. Docents checked galleries, wailing artifacts. Lighthouse Fresnel lenses. Greg radioed security. 10 minutes past eternities. In the third-floor Silent Seas exhibit, Ben found her. The gallery rereaded underwater acoustics. Ambient whale songs pulsed gently. Rose sat alone before a video panel of jellyfish. Baton swaying, she seemed entranced, not frightened. Ben knelt, heart hammering. You had us worried, kiddo. She pointed to the speaker. Low whale calls rose and fell. She moved the baton and Sinrani conducting the ocean. Ben chuckled, tears of relief. Of course, you found your next orchestra. He lifted the violin, answering the whales with a soft, sliding glissando. The room filled with duet string and mammal and otherworldly harmony. Evelyn hurried in, breathless. On seeing them, tension melted. She sank to the floor, skirt pooling, listening. Mansion emptiness still echoed in her bones, but here museum hush. Whale song, she felt whole. 9. Evening draped itself over the coast. Back at Hartley Manor, guests gone. Staff dismissed, lights dimmed to amber. Evelyn, Ben, and Rose sat at the long dining table, 3 chairs amid 20 vacant. Soup bowls steamed between them, leftover fobby cauliflower, simple. Evelyn surveyed the vast room, the chandelier-esque glitter, the high ceiling whose vault carried every echo. You know, she said, this place is too large. Ben sipped soup, beautiful but lonely. Exactly, she set her spoon down. After Lydia died, I bought space to outrun pain. I kept filling halls with art, furniture, but absence only reverberates louder. Ben touched the table's oak grain. Where do we go when echo hurts? Her eyes softened. We shrink the map. She glanced at Rose. What would you say to selling the manor, moving closer to community? Maybe a house near the diner where laughter won't drown. Ben blinked. You'd leave Hartley Manor? It is just stone, she whispered. Family is song. Rose tapped the table twice, yes. Tears welled. Evelyn exhaled. Then the mansion becomes a music therapy center. Open the doors to families who need healing. Ben's face lit, cracks and all. Evelyn laughed, especially cracks. They finished soup, then migrated to the conservatory. Snowdrops opened in planters warmed by hidden coils. Ben played lullabies, Rose tapped rhythms, Evelyn hummed harmony. The mansion, though spacious, no longer felt empty. It resonated, every marble vein humming with their modest trio. 10. Close to midnight, Evelyn escorted Ben to the foyer. Moonlight silvered the compass mosaic. He fiddled with car keys, reluctant. Stay, she said quietly. The carriage house is warm. He smiled. Thought you'd never ask. He set keys on the console. Besides, tomorrow's menu needs planning. Evelyn's brow rose. Tomorrow? Rose wants to conduct whales again. I figure we make a sea salt caramel souffle, capture oceanus rise and fall. Evelyn shook her head, amused. You dream in flavors. He stepped closer. I dream in possibilities now. His hand brushed hers. Electricity, soft and certain, sparked. For a beat, the mansion held its breath. Then Evelyn leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his like she once had on the breakwater. No grand kiss, just contact where intentions exchange vows. Ben closed his eyes, shoulder knots unspuckling. When they parted, Evelyn whispered, empty spaces make room for new music. He answered, then let us fill them. Upstairs, Rose peeked from the balustrade, baton clutched. Seeing the moment, she tapped the rail thrice, a new signal they'd learn later meant encore. The lighthouse beam swept by, illuminating stained glass, gilded frames, and finally their 2 figures below, small against architecture, yet large enough to anchor it. The mansion, once echoing with absence, surrendered its hush to a different sound, the first quiet notes of a life rearranged, smaller in space, vaster in love. And outside, snowdrops pushed through thawing soil, stubborn reminders that even winter palaces can learn to bloom. 1. The sun hadn't broken the horizon yet, but a bruised streak of amber already bled across the Atlantic, promising warmth after months of iron-gray dawns. The shoreline breathed the hush usually reserved for cathedrals, gulls still roosted, and waves rolled in as if afraid to disturb what was coming. At the end of Wharf Street, the seaside diner glowed against the half-light, its neon open sign flickering like a bedtime night light that never learned the meaning of sleep. Inside, Miriam adjusted the pegboard letters above the cash register. Yesterday they read "Try the crab." Today she slid them into a new creed: "Every sunrise deserves a song." She stepped back to admire her handiwork, hands on generous hips, cheeks already flushed with the oven's first breath. The bell jingled, letting in a gust of salted dawn and Ben Russo's baritone whistle. He pushed through the door, balancing a crate of strawberries on one hip and the violin case on the other. "Morning, Captain," Miriam greeted, pocketing her letter stash. "You beat me to it," Ben replied, head tilting at the board. "Perfect." He set the berries on the counter and inhaled deeply, as though cataloging every scent, proofing brioche, percolating Sumatra, and the faintest note of lilac from the bouquet on table 3. Lilac, not in season, but Miriam had insisted the first blooms flown in from a florist 2 towns over. Today was not ordinary after all. 2. At Hartley's soon-to-be-sold manor, Evelyn guided Rose down the last step of the marble staircase, their footsteps echoing in halls that had finally learned to sing back. The grand foyer was a mess of cardboard boxes labeled "Books Donate." Lennon's Community Center, and China Keeps. A golden afternoon, months ago, would have seen Evelyn twitch at disarray. Now she felt lighter with every sealed carton, as if each taped lid exhaled stale grief and inhaled possibility. Rose wore a sage green linen dress decorated with embroidery that mimicked rolling waves. A tiny silver seahorse pin Ben's gift fastened her braid. The baton rested across her lap like a captain's spyglass. She traced its length with her fingertips, anticipation crackling in the air between them. Malcolm, former chauffeur now project manager for the mansion turned museenter, waited by the door. "Ready for the big reveal?" he asked, lowering the ramp for Rose's chair. Evelyn smiled. "Ready for the sunrise." 3. Back at the diner, Ben inspected his kingdom tables pushed to the walls. Wooden folding chairs set in 3 half-moons facing the picture window, and at the center a small platform fashioned from reclaimed pier boards. White fairy lights wound around railing spindles borrowed from the harbor master's holiday stash, casting soft halos over the linoleum floor. He moved to the kitchen. Fresh dough rose in ceramic crocks, soon to become harbor rolls. On the stove, tomato orange soup simmered, its color as brilliant as dawn. And in the fridge, 20 mini Heseeks chilled lemon zest crust. Blueberry swirl, Lydia's favorite, recalled by Evelyn's recipe card. He checked the clock. 5:47 a.m., 18 minutes until sunrise, 33 until showtime. 4. Guests arrived in trickles, some familiar: the retired carpenter, Dr. Sinclair and his partner, a half-dozen diner regulars who claimed stools like pews. Others were new families from Rose's therapy circles, local teachers, even a lone teenager with headphones, invited by Miriam after he tipped her $20 for hot cocoa and confided that music quieted the static. One and all, they stepped inside, rubbing hands against cold, eyes widening at fairy lights in a sunrise church. Greg Tolland appeared in a navy windbreaker, no tie in sight. He carried a clipboard that looked naked without donor packets. Miriam intercepted him. "Clipboard goes under your seat. Today is about hearts, not ledgers." Greg blinked, then surrendered the board with a meek nod. Sloane Merritt slipped in, but no camera crew, just a leather notebook. She caught Ben's eye, offered a respectful nod, then tucked herself into a corner booth where the morning light would catch her pen. 5. The Bentley coasted into the gravel lot at 6:05. Ben hurried out. Wiping flour on his apron, he opened the passenger door to greet Rose. She rolled down her window first. "Ta-ta-ta," she said, her newest verbalization. Syllables as delicate as a sand fiddler crab tap dancing. It won T Dictionary English. But it was music and everyone knew what it meant. Ben. He bowed. "Maestro." Evelyn unfolded from the driver's side, wearing green-colored trousers and sneakers that squeaked slightly in the crusted salt. "No red carpet," she teased. "Only a sunrise," he answered. "Turns out it's inclusive." He lifted the violin case while Evelyn wheeled Rose along the ramp. When they entered, conversations dipped, then rose again, brighter, like a wave acknowledging the moon. 6. At 6:15, Miriam leaned her coffee spoon against a glass. "Friends, take your seats. Our chef requests your patience and appetites." Chairs scraped forward. Sunlight kissed the ocean just beyond the large window, first glimpse of molten gold. Ben stepped onto the platform. He wore the white jacket but had rolled the cuffs, exposing the anchor tattoo and a new bracelet seed beads woven by Rose, each bead a color from their Miracle Week map. "Morning," he began, voice carrying calm. "When we started meeting in this diner, none of us planned for violins, meteor showers of marshmallows, or a mansion becoming a music center. Yet here we are, proof that plans are just outlines for surprise." He invited Miriam forward with a tray of tops and of course marshmallows floating like miniature lithobuoys. Guests sipped while Ben narrated the first course, sunrise polenta, now served in espresso cups so small that even the youngest hands could manage them. "If dawn had a flavor," he said, "I think it would taste like corn remembering summer." Laughter rippled. 7. Course followed course, tiny, flavorful postcards of their journey. With each bite, Ben offered a story. Foggy cauliflower born when a pipe burst. Mesopier moon, proof that sweet and savory speak the same language. Hopa El Orange, once nearly silenced by fear. People listened not with ears but with their whole bodies, shoulders easing, fists unlenching, griefs briefly loosening their zippers. Rose sat at platform's edge, spoon in hand, feeding herself half the bites with determined grace. The audience noticed and applauded softly each time, affirmation instead of spectacle. 8. At 6:45, the sun finally lifted free of the horizon, flooding the diner in crow's gold. Ben handed the violin to Sloane, who gasped while he wheeled Rose center stage. Evelyn joined, holding her granddaughter's baton. Ben addressed the room. Before we play, there's one more course, something experimental. He glanced at Evelyn. Nerves and excitement dueled in the glint of his eye. He stepped down, dug into his apron pocket, and withdrew a small wooden box. Guests leaned forward. Miriam clutched a napkin. Greg forgot to breathe. Ben opened the box to reveal a ring, white gold band. Center stone, a pale sapphire caught between two tiny emerald leaves. Evelyn Hartley, he said, kneeling beside Rose's chair, because this moment belonged to all three. You once told me empty spaces make room for new music. You filled mine with laughter, bravery, and soup ladles. Will you marry me and let us keep composing, cracks and all? Guests' tears. Camera phones hastily pulled, then lowered when Miriam hissed compassion. Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth. Rose lifted the baton, tapped Ben's shoulder 3 times. Encore. Evelyn laughed through tears. Yes, she whispered, voice thick, then louder, yes. Ben slipped the ring onto her finger. The diner erupted in applause. Mugs rattling on tabletops like tambourines. Greg wiped suspicious moisture from his eyes. Sloane's pen scribbled frantically. 9. When the room quieted, Ben retrieved the violin. Maestro, he said to Rose. She raised her baton. The first note soared somewhere over the rainbow. But halfway through, Ben transitioned into the new piece he decomposed, Second Chance's Suite. Soft pizzicato accompanied by Miriam on a countertop, turned drum, wooden spoon against pot lid, and Greg on impromptu tambourine, salt shaker, cowbell. Evelyn hummed harmony, her voice weaving through violinist thread. Rose conducted, wrist fluid, hair catching sunlight like spun copper. For 6 minutes, time forgot how to tick. The ocean just beyond glass seemed to still, listening. 10. When the final chord faded, Ben lowered his bow. Rose, surprised everyone, uttered a full, clear word more, audible, undeniable. Gasps turned into cheers. Dr. Sinclair's chin quivered with professional awe. Ben bowed. Breakfast encore then. Miriam, if you please. Harbor rolls. Platters emerged, steaming bread scented with honey and sea salt. People tore pieces. Half plates, broke bread in literal communion. Conversation blossomed, parents trading therapy anecdotes. Teenagers making TikTok plans to broadcast Sunrise Symphony. Sloane interviewing Miriam about napkin provenance. 11. Evelyn slipped outside to breathe the air, ring catching dawn in prismatic flashes. Ben followed, draping his jacket over her shoulders. Cold? Brimming, she corrected. They watched waves in companionable hush until footsteps crunched behind them. Rose, assisted by Dr. Sinclair and a pediatric walker, took careful steps across the wooden deck. 5 in total, small, wobbly, miraculous. She reached them, gripping Ben's trouser leg. Evelyn knelt, tears spare but bright. You came to the sunrise on your own 2 feet. Rose offered a marshmallow from her pocket, the Universal Medal of Honor. 12. By 9 a.m., the diner's formal event was done. But nobody left. Miriam brewed extra pots. Greg wiped tables. Ben struck up chord progressions for impromptu sing-alongs. Donations unsolicited filled a lighthouse-shaped jar on the counter. One family pledged volunteer hours for the upcoming music therapy center. Another offered graphic design skills to build its website. Outside, construction noises wafted from Hartley Manor Hill, workers already sketching accessible ramps and soundproof practice rooms. Community blossomed in real time. Evelyn perched on a stool, sipping chamomile. Sloane approached, off the record. The reporter said, closing her notebook. This morning changed how I write. I usually chase wow. Today I learned to chase why. Evelyn smiled. When story becomes sanctuary, everybody wins. 13. Afternoon came. The diner finally thinned to its usual trickle. Miriam boxed leftover harbor rolls for the local shelter. Greg tallied donations more than last night's black tie would have dreamed. Sloane left a thank you note shaped like a treble clef. Dr. Sinclair hugged Ben so fiercely the chef's ribs complained. Rose napped in a booth, sweater cocoon under her head. Her baton rested beside a coloring page depicting a whale and violin dancing. Evelyn and Ben cleaned counters together. She fliked soap bubbles, he pretended offense. They laughed like teenagers. Miriam pretended not to watch, but her smile dimmed lights. At 4, Ben locked the front door, flipped the sign to close special event. They dimmed overheads, leaving fairy lights glowing in the twilight. 14. Dinner was takeout chowder eaten on the beach, all 3 wrapped in quilts. Lighthouse blinking hello every 12 seconds. Waves hissed secrets around their ankles. Seagulls scouted for crumbs. Evelyn leaned against Ben's shoulder. I used to believe legacies were carved into marble plaques. Turns out they reladled into coffee cups. Ben kissed her hair. Everything tastes better shared. Rose, legs tucked sideways, hummed the sweetest melody, words still elusive, but meaning unmistakable. 15. The following weeks unfurled like pages eager to be read. Hartley Manor's listing drew buyers with grand visions. But Evelyn accepted the bid from a non-profit coalition at half-market value conditional on its conversion to the Rosemaryla Music Center. The carriage house stayed in the family. The trio's new snug home a stone's throw from classrooms and therapy gardens. Greg resigned chairmanship, replaced by Miriam, who insisted on title Chief Kindness Officer. Sloane's feature ran worldwide when Sunrise found a song. Comments flooded in from Brazil to Bangalore. Viewers donating to Myrograb programs in memory of children they'd lost. On opening day of the center, Rose cut the ribbon scissors guided by steady hands but her own force behind them. She spoke 2 new words: welcome home. 16 months later, wedding bells, literal cowbells borrowed from a farm just inland, rang by the sea. Ceremony at low tide, reception potluck style on the pier, chowder, brioche rolls, blueberry hezeeks, and one ambitious teenager as vegan sushi. Evelyn wore ivory linen. Ben, a slate blue jacket embroidered BE in marigold thread. Rose served as conductor and flower girl, tossing petals time to music. As vows concluded, humpback whales breached on the horizon, as if answering her unseen baton. The kiss tasted of sea salt and orange glaze. 17. But that is another sunrise. Today's concludes in the diner's afterglow. Ben places closed for dreaming on the door, dimming neon. Evelyn and Rose stand outside watching the sky bruise purple, then indigo. Street lamps hum somewhere, a radio drifts old Nat King Cole. Evelyn squeezes Ben's hand. Remember our first night? Bell chimed. Soup spilled, life pivoted. He laughs softly. I remember a woman who tipped with gratitude instead of cash. I still owe you interest. Paid, he replies, kissing her. Rose taps their shoulders. They turn to see her extend the baton toward the horizon one last time this day. She flicks her wrist, gulls rise in lazy arcs, silhouettes against dying light, her final orchestra. Ben lifts the violin but doesn't play. Instead, he lowers it, understanding that sometimes the greatest music is silence shared after a long, beautiful song. They stand together, 3 silhouettes stitched by possibility, while the lighthouse begins its nightly vigil, beam sweeping, as if ensuring every ship, every lost soul, can find safe harbor just beyond the seaside diner's neon glow. And when the first star pricks the sky, Rose whispers clear, certain home. The world, for one exquisite moment, agrees.